It stood 8 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark fur that caught the firelight and glowed like something from a furnace. And it was not running. Every animal in that forest was running. Every deer, every bird, every living thing with the sense God gave it was fleeing south as fast as it could move. But this thing was facing the fire, standing at the edge of the tree line like a soldier holding a position he knows he cannot hold. And 11 men on Harley Davidsons watched it happen. None of us screamed. None of us moved. 11 outlaw bikers who had faced down rival clubs and prison yards and everything the world could throw at a man. And we stood there frozen, not because we were brave, because something in our minds had broken and the pieces had not yet hit the floor. I need to tell you something I have kept locked inside my chest for 43 years. Something that changed everything. Something that broke my marriage, haunted my brothers, and killed at least one of us. My name is Dale Kowalski. I am 78 years old, and I am dying. End-stage liver failure. That is what the doctors call it. 40-some years of unfiltered camels and a body I never treated with anything close to kindness. My skin has gone the color of old newspaper. My belly is swollen with fluid they drain every couple of weeks at the VA hospital in Milwaukee. My hands shake so badly some mornings I cannot hold a coffee cup. The toxins my liver can no longer filter are building up in my blood, clouding my thinking, making my skin itch like insects are crawling beneath it. They have me on a transplant list I will never reach the top of. I know that. They know it. We all pretend otherwise because it makes the appointments easier. But my memory is clear. On the things that matter, my memory is perfectly, terribly clear. August 1st, 1983. The Chippewa National Forest, northern Minnesota. A wildfire eating the world, and something standing in the flames that should not exist. But before I tell you what we saw, you need to understand something. You need to understand who we were. Because who we were is the reason we stayed silent. And the silence is the thing that destroyed us even more than what we witnessed. In 1983, I was 35 years old. I rode with the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club out of Racine, Wisconsin. Had been riding with them since I was 22. I was the club mechanic, not the president, not the sergeant at arms, not the enforcer, the mechanic. The man who kept every bike in the chapter running smooth. I had hands like my father. He worked the line at American Motors in Kenosha for 31 years until they shut the plant down. Stanislaw Kowalski. Everyone called him Stan. Big hands, knuckle-scarred hands, hands that understood machines the way some people understand music. I inherited those hands. I could rebuild a shovelhead engine blindfolded. I could hear a misfire at 60 miles per hour and tell you which cylinder was the problem. I could feel a worn bearing through the grip of a wrench before any gauge would register a wobble. That was my value. That was why they kept me around, even though I was never the toughest or the loudest or the one who made a room go quiet when he walked in. I was the one who made sure we got where we were going and got home again. In a club like ours, that mattered more than muscle. The Iron Reapers were not a Sunday riding club. I will not pretend otherwise. We were outlaw. Full patch, 1%. The things we did to earn money and hold territory are things I have spent decades trying to forget. But we were also a family. The kind of family desperate men build when their real families have failed them. Or when they have failed their real families. My father never understood why I joined. He had worked 31 years in a factory so his children would not have to live hard lives. And here was his son, sewing a patch on a leather vest and riding with men the police watched like hawks. My mother cried the first time she saw that patch. She was a woman who prayed the rosary every night before bed, and I think she saw that patch as proof that her prayers had not been enough. I carry that guilt. I have always carried it. But I had come home from 2 years in the army with a head full of noise and nothing to do with myself. The Reapers gave me a wrench and a garage and a reason to get up in the morning. For a long time, that was enough. That summer, our chapter president organized what he called the Northern Run. Big Jim Paskiewicz, a man built like a shipping container with a voice that could stop a bar fight from across the room. Big Jim said the run was about brotherhood, about getting back to what the club was supposed to be. 11 bikes, 11 men, no wives, no girlfriends, no business, just the road. I think Big Jim was going through something. His oldest boy had just been arrested again. There was talk his wife was leaving, but Big Jim never talked about personal things. He talked about the road, and we followed. We left Racine on a Thursday morning in late July, 3 days after my daughter Emily's 4th birthday. I can still see her face. Pink streamers in the backyard. A cake shaped like a butterfly. Emily in a yellow sundress, shrieking every time the neighbor kids chased her. I stood at the grill with a beer and watched her and thought, this is what it is supposed to feel like. This is what all the rest of it is for. I kissed Karen goodbye that morning, my wife. She said, be careful. I said, I always am. That was a lie. We both knew it was a lie. But it was the kind of lie that holds a marriage together when the truth would blow it apart. What I did not know, what I could not have known, was that I was about to see something that would make every other lie I had ever told look like nothing. Something that would put a wall of glass between me and my family that I would never find a way through. The first 5 days were good. We rode through the Nicollet National Forest on roads that wound through stands of white pine and sugar maple so tall they looked like the columns of a church. We camped in places so remote we had to ride 4 miles of dirt road to reach them. We drank around fires and told stories that got wilder with every telling. My shovel head was running beautifully. I had rebuilt the top end 3 weeks before the trip, and the engine had that deep, even rumble that tells you everything is right. I want to remember those days clearly, because what came after has colored everything. Day 6, August 1st. We had crossed into Minnesota and were riding through the Chippewa National Forest. The temperature had been in the high 90s all week, unusual for northern Minnesota. The air was dry enough to crack your lips between gas stops. Every local we talked to said the same thing. Fire danger. The whole North Country was a tinderbox. One lightning strike, and it all goes up. We made camp that evening on Forest Service land about 14 miles off the main highway. Big Jim had gotten directions from a bartender in a town called Bana, a clearing near a creek, ringed by red pines that stood straight as sentries. The creek was barely a trickle because of the drought, but the ground was flat, good enough. 11 men, 11 Harleys, lined up at the edge of that clearing like metal horses at a hitching post. We built a fire, drank whiskey. Stash had a transistor radio tuned to some AM station playing Waylon and Merle. Lyle Engstrom told a story about a run he did in '78 that involved a broken chain and a county fair and a woman named Jolene. Bobby Stasiak, Stash, argued about carburetors with Carl Dietrich until they were both red in the face. Big Jim sat on a log and sharpened his pocket knife and said nothing, which was his way of saying he was content. The fire crackled. The whiskey went around. For a few hours, we were exactly what Big Jim wanted us to be. Brothers. Nothing more, nothing less. The sky turned pink, then purple, then black. The stars came out the way they only do 100 miles from the nearest city, thick as spilled salt across the entire dome of the sky. I have never seen stars like that before or since. In Racine, you are lucky to see a handful. Out there, the sky was so full of them, it almost looked fake, like someone had taken white paint and flicked it across a black canvas. I lay on my bedroll and smoked a cigarette and watched the Milky Way and thought about Emily blowing out the candles on that butterfly cake. I thought about Karen standing in the kitchen doorway, watching me pack my saddlebags, the way she leaned against the frame with her arms crossed, the way she smiled, but only with her mouth. I should have paid more attention to that smile. I should have understood what it meant. But I was 35 and stupid and convinced that the road would always bring me home to something worth coming home to. That was the last peaceful moment I would have for 43 years. And what woke me from it was a smell that I can still taste if I close my eyes. Somewhere around 2 a.m, the smoke woke me. Not campfire smoke. This was thick, acrid. It stung your eyes and coated the inside of your mouth like ash. I sat up. The sky to the northwest had turned orange. Not sunset orange, furious orange, pulsing orange. The kind of orange that means the world is on fire. I shook Big Jim awake. He came up fast, the way men do when they have spent their lives expecting trouble. He looked at that sky and said one word: fire. Every man was on his feet within minutes. The wind had shifted, northwest, blowing the smoke straight at us, and we could hear the fire. People do not understand that until they have been near one. A wildfire has a voice. It sounds like a freight train made of cracking wood and roaring air. It does not stop. It does not slow down. It gets louder every minute. Donnie Riggs, our road captain, had spent a season with the Forest Service before his first prison stretch. He said we had 45 minutes, maybe less if the wind picked up. Big Jim made the call. We are leaving. Now. We packed nothing, pulled on boots and jackets and helmets, kicked our bikes to life, rode out of that clearing in a ragged column with headlights cutting through smoke thick enough to taste. The logging road was a single lane of packed dirt. My headlight showed me nothing but the red glow of Donnie's taillight ahead and walls of smoke on either side. The heat was building. I could feel it through my jacket, through my jeans, on the exposed skin of my hands. The trees on either side were beginning to glow at their tops, crowning. Donnie said later that meant the fire was moving through the canopy above us. We were riding beneath a ceiling of fire. We hit the county road and turned south. The smoke was thinner here. Big Jim was pushing the pace, faster than was safe on an unfamiliar road at 2 a.m. Nobody argued. Nobody wanted to argue. The fire behind us was a wall of orange that stretched across the entire northern horizon, and it was growing. I could feel the heat on my back even at speed. Embers were drifting across the road like fireflies from hell, landing on our jackets, on our tanks, on the asphalt ahead. The air tasted like charcoal and chemicals. Every breath was work. We had been riding south for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15. The fire was still visible behind us, but the immediate danger was fading. My heart rate was starting to come down. I was starting to think about stopping, about finding a town, a gas station, a place to regroup. I was starting to think that the worst was behind us. I was wrong. The worst was 40 yards to our right, standing perfectly still, waiting for us to notice. But what we were riding away from was not the thing that would haunt us. It was what we were about to see. Terry Novak saw it first. Terry rode at the back of the column. Always did. He flashed his high beam 3 times. Our signal, something on the road. Big Jim saw it in his mirrors and raised his fist. Slow down, tighten up. We went from 60 to 30, then 20, then stopped. 11 Harleys, idling on a dark road in northern Minnesota. A forest fire eating the world behind us. I could not see it at first. The smoke made everything hazy. My eyes were watering, but then the wind shifted. A pocket of clear air opened up on the east side of the road. And there it was. A figure, standing in the tree line, maybe 40 yards off the road, upright, enormous. I am not a small man. In '83, I was 6 feet tall, 220 pounds, arms thick enough to deadlift a transmission out of a Harley frame. This thing made me feel like a child. It stood at least 8 feet tall, maybe more, broad across the shoulders in a way that did not look human. The proportions were wrong. Arms too long, torso too thick, covered in dark fur that caught the firelight and gave it a reddish sheen. And it was not running. It was facing the fire, standing at the edge of the trees with its back mostly toward us. Watching the approaching fire line the way a man watches a flood coming toward his house. Not with panic, not with the blind instinct that sends every living thing running south. This thing was standing its ground. Big Jim killed his engine. One by one, the rest of us did the same. 11 Harleys went silent. The only sound was the distant roar of the fire, the wind in the trees. And then I heard something else, coming from the figure. A low, resonant vocalization. Not a growl, not a moan, not anything I have ever heard any animal make. It was almost like a chant, a deep, rhythmic pattern of sound that rose and fell and rose again. It carried across the distance between us with a clarity that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. What was that sound? I have asked myself that question every single day for 43 years, and I still do not have an answer. But I will tell you what it felt like. It felt like prayer. It felt like grief. It felt like something ancient saying goodbye to something it loved. Nobody spoke. 11 men who had collectively faced down rival clubs and police raids and bar fights that sent people to the hospital. Not one of us said a word. Stash was next to me, shaking, full body tremors, his knuckles white on the handlebars. I looked down the line. Mouse had stepped back from his bike, ready to run on foot. Carl had his hand on his belt knife, which was absurd, like bringing a pocket knife to stop a landslide. Freddie Pantoja was crossing himself. I had never seen him do that in 4 years of riding together. Dennis Brandt, the newest patch, was muttering something that might have been a prayer. We were hard men. We had done hard things. And every one of us was terrified in a way that went beyond anything we had ever known. This was not the fear of a fight. This was the fear of the world being bigger and stranger and more dangerous than you ever imagined. The fear of knowing you will never unknow what you are seeing. The creature shifted its weight. Even that small motion sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through my body. It moved the way something moves when it carries enormous mass but has absolute control. No wasted motion, no stumbling, like watching a piece of the forest come alive. The muscles under that dark fur rolled and shifted with a fluidity that spoke of unimaginable strength held in perfect check. I have worked with engines my entire life. I know what controlled power looks like. A well-tuned Harley at idle does not shake or rattle. It hums. It holds all that horsepower in reserve with a kind of mechanical patience. That creature was controlled power, patience embodied in muscle and bone. I noticed details my conscious mind could not process in the moment, but that burned into my memory like photographs. The hands, enormous, twice the size of mine. But they were not paws, not claws. They were hands, fingers, opposable thumbs, hands that could grip and build and make decisions. The feet were planted in scorched earth, bare and flat and wide. The grass around them was flattened in a circle, worn to dirt. It had been standing there for hours, watching the fire approach. We had arrived in the middle of something already underway. Then it turned, and the firelight caught its face. I will carry that image with me into whatever comes after this life. The face was not human. Heavy brow, massive jaw, broad flat nose. But the eyes reflected the firelight like amber glass, and they held an expression I have only seen once before in my life, on my father's face. The day they told him American Motors was closing the Kenosha plant. The look of a man watching everything he built disappear and being powerless to stop it. It was grief. This creature was watching its home burn, and it was not going to leave. It looked at us, directly at us. 11 men on motorcycles on a dark road. It did not flinch. It did not run. It did not charge. It held our gaze for what felt like a full minute. And something passed between us that I cannot explain. It was measuring us, deciding if we were a threat, a witness, something else entirely. Then it turned back to the fire, made that sound again, that deep, resonant chanting from somewhere in its chest. And it began to walk, not away from the fire, toward it. It walked into the burning forest with the calm, deliberate stride of something that had made a decision it was never going to take back. And what happened after that? What did 11 outlaw bikers do after watching something impossible walk into an inferno? We ran. Big Jim kicked his bike to life. We followed. We rode south for 30 miles without stopping. When we pulled into an all-night gas station on the outskirts of a town called McGregor, Big Jim got off his bike and walked to the edge of the lot and stood there staring north. The sky was still orange. You could see the glow from 30 miles away. Nobody talked. We filled tanks, bought coffee and cigarettes, stood in the fluorescent light like men who had just had the furniture in their minds rearranged. Mouse's hands were shaking too hard to light his cigarette. I took his lighter from him and held the flame steady for him, and our eyes met, and neither of us said a word. There was nothing to say. What vocabulary do you use for something that has no name? Stash kept opening his mouth, then closing it. Like a man trying to start a sentence, he does not have the words to finish. Freddie sat on the curb with his head in his hands for 20 minutes. Lyle paced the parking lot from one end to the other, back and forth, like a dog that has been penned too long. Carl stood with his back against the wall and stared at his boots and did not move. Terry was leaning against his bike with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, and something in his eyes that I recognize now, in hindsight, as the first crack, the first fracture in the thing that would eventually break him. Big Jim drank his coffee and smoked and stared north. Finally, Donnie walked over. Jim. What the hell was that? Big Jim shook his head. I do not know. Then he said the words that would define the next 4 decades of my life. We do not talk about this, not ever, not to anyone. He made each of us swear, individually, standing in that parking lot with the sky burning behind us. He looked each man in the eye and said, "This stays with us. This dies with us." He started with Donnie, then Stash, then me. When he got to me, he put his hand on my shoulder, and I could feel that his hand was shaking. Big Jim Paskiewicz, the man I had seen stare down a room full of pagans without blinking, was shaking. He looked at me and said, "Dale, you understand?" And I said yes, and he moved to the next man. And the next, 11 promises, 11 nods. 11 men binding themselves to silence with nothing but a word and a handshake under a burning sky. One by one, we swore, and that oath held. For 43 years, that oath held. Not because Big Jim was our president and his word was law, although it was. The oath held because every man there knew the truth. We were outlaw bikers. Our word was worth nothing to the straight world. If 11 professors had seen what we saw, they would have called a press conference. If 11 soldiers had seen it, they would have filed a report. But 11 bikers, we would have been laughed out of every room we walked into, dismissed as drunks, liars, lunatics, men who had seen too many miles and too many bar fights and too many bottles. Nobody would have believed us, and the disbelief would have been worse than the silence, because at least in silence, the memory stayed whole. At least in silence, nobody could take it from us and twist it into a joke, so we kept our mouths shut, and it destroyed us, one by one, slowly, the way water destroys stone, not with force, with time. The northern run ended that night. We rode home the next day, 14 hours of highway. Nobody suggested continuing the trip. Nobody wanted to be in those woods anymore. When we got back to Racine, we parked our bikes and went to our homes, and we tried to pretend August 1st was just another night. But it was not. I went home to Karen and Emily. Karen was making dinner. Emily was watching cartoons on the living room floor, and I stood in the doorway and felt something open up inside me, a distance, a gap. I was standing on one side of a wall of glass, my wife, my daughter, the house on Ohio Street, the butterfly cake and the pink streamers, all on the other side. I could see them, but I could not reach them. Not really, not anymore. I told Karen the trip was fine, told her we cut it short because of the wildfires. True. She asked if I was okay. I said I was. Not true. She looked at me the way she sometimes did. That look that said she could see something was wrong, but knew better than to push. This secret was different from the others. This was not club business. This was not about what I had done or what I had seen done. This was about what is real and what is not. And I had no words for it, no framework, no way to make it fit inside the life I was living. The weeks after were bad. I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face in the firelight. Those amber eyes, that massive silhouette walking toward the flames. I would lie next to Karen and stare at the ceiling and wonder. What was it protecting? Its territory? Its family? Was there a group of them in those woods? Was it a parent standing between the fire and its young? Or something I did not have the capacity to understand? I started riding north alone, every other weekend, told Karen it was club runs. Instead, I rode past Wausau, past Merrill, into the lake country, parked my bike, walked into the woods, sat and listened. I brought a notebook and wrote down everything I could remember. The exact time, the weather, the wind, the position relative to the fire line, the sound. I tried to transcribe that sound phonetically. No combination of letters could capture it. I went to the library and pulled every book they had on Bigfoot, Sasquatch, This was 1983. No internet. Research meant library cards and microfiche and dusty books nobody had touched in years. I read John Green, Grover Krantz, Pacific Northwest Field Reports, Appalachian Sightings, Canadian Encounters. None of them described what I saw. They described something elusive, shy, a thing that ran from human contact. The thing I saw was not running from anything. It was standing its ground, choosing to face destruction rather than flee. I was obsessed. The need to understand was stronger than anything else, stronger than my marriage, stronger than my daughter. That is a sentence I can barely stand to say. But it is the truth, and I am too old and too sick to dress it up. Karen noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed I was gone more often, that I came home smelling like pine needles instead of exhaust. She asked me once, at the kitchen table after Emily was in bed, if I was seeing someone. The question hit me like a slap. I was not seeing someone. I was chasing a ghost through the Minnesota woods. But I could not tell her that, so I said no. I said I was dealing with some things. She looked at me with those patient eyes and said, "Dale, you have been dealing with things since the day I met you. When are you going to let me help?" I did not let her help. That is the thing about a secret like this. It does not just sit in your mind. It colonizes everything. It changes how you see the world, how you talk, how you sit in a room with your own family. You are always calculating, always monitoring what you say, always aware of the gap between what you know and what everyone around you knows. It is exhausting, and it makes you mean, not violent, just distant, cold, unreachable. I became a man who was always somewhere else, even when I was right there. Big Jim pulled me aside at a meeting in October. He said I was distracted, making mistakes. I had cross-threaded a cylinder stud on Stash's panhead, something I would never have done in a million years if I was paying attention. Big Jim looked at me hard and said, "I know what is in your head, Dale. It is in mine too, but you cannot let it eat you. Put it in a box. Close the lid. Live your life." I tried. I threw myself into the shop. Extra work. Rebuilding bikes for other chapters. Machining custom parts. Staying until midnight with the radio on and my hands busy. When my hands were busy, my mind was quieter. An engine has no secrets. An engine does not stare at you with amber eyes and make you question reality. An engine is metal and fire and air. You understand those three things. You can make it do whatever you want. There is a comfort in that, a safety, but it never lasted. The memory always came back, at night, in the silence, lying in bed, sitting on the porch, standing at the kitchen window watching snow fall. And suddenly I was back on that road, with the fire eating the sky and that sound rolling through the smoke. And I would feel it again, not just fear, something bigger than fear. The feeling of standing at the edge of a hole in everything you thought you knew, looking down into something vast and dark and alive. Karen left in the spring of '89. She took Emily, moved to her sister's in Green Bay. She did not scream, did not throw things. She packed 2 suitcases and Emily's stuffed animals and stood in the hallway and said the words I will never forget. "I have loved you for 12 years, Dale, and for 6 of those years you have not been here. I do not know where you go, but it is somewhere I cannot follow, and I am tired of waiting for you to come back." She was right. She was right about all of it. I stood in that hallway and watched her walk out the door with my daughter's hand in hers. Emily was 10. She was wearing a purple backpack with a unicorn on it. She turned around once and looked at me, and I could see that she did not understand why we were not stopping them. Why I was not reaching out and saying, "Wait, do not go. I will explain everything." She was 10 years old, and she was looking at her father for an answer, and I had nothing to give her. I did not stop them, because stopping them meant explaining, and explaining meant the truth. And the truth was something I had sworn to keep. So I let my family walk out the door to keep a promise to 10 men about something we saw in the middle of the night. I stood in that empty hallway and listened to the car start, and the tires crunch on the driveway gravel, and the engine fade into the distance. And then I sat down on the floor with my back against the wall, and I stayed there until the light coming through the window changed from afternoon to evening to dark. I did not eat. I did not move. I sat there and I felt the full weight of what the secret had cost me. And it was heavier than anything I had ever carried, heavier than an engine block, heavier than a guilty conscience, heavier than grief. That is the math you do when a secret has taken root in the center of your life. Everything else becomes expendable. I stayed with the club until 95. By then, Big Jim was 4 years in the ground. Stash was in Waupun doing 15 years. Donnie had moved to Arizona for his lungs. Carl and Freddie were dead on a highway outside Eau Claire. The club was changing. Younger guys who did not ride because they loved riding, but because they loved the image. They wore the patch like a costume. They talked about brotherhood like it was something you could buy at a leather shop. They had no idea what real brotherhood looked like. Real brotherhood was 11 men standing on a dark road, too terrified to speak, watching something impossible, and knowing that the only people who would ever believe them were the 10 men standing beside them. That is brotherhood. Everything else is just a club. I turned in my patch on a Tuesday in March, walked out of the clubhouse for the last time. 23 years. Gone like exhaust in the wind. I stood in the parking lot and looked at the building and felt the kind of emptiness that comes when you have been carrying something heavy for so long that putting it down does not feel like relief. It feels like amputation. I rented a shop on 6th Street and fixed bikes for whoever brought them in. 12, 14 hours a day sometimes. The smell of gasoline and oil and hot metal, my medicine, the only thing that kept me tethered to the real world. I lived alone, 1-bedroom apartments that all looked the same. TV on all night because silence was worse than any sound. Frozen dinners, canned soup, coffee that could strip paint. I never went back to that road, not the exact road. I went north many times, dozens, maybe 100, but I never returned to that specific stretch of county road in the Chippewa National Forest. Some part of me was afraid I would find nothing. Some part of me was afraid I would find something. I could not decide which was worse. So I circled, south of the spot, east of it, west, like a satellite in a decaying orbit that knows it will crash but cannot change its trajectory. I did not drink. My uncle Tadek drank himself to death at 44. I saw what it did to his family and swore I would not follow that road. The cigarettes were different, smoked from 15 until the doctor said my liver was done. Even then, I bargained for another year before quitting. The smoking did not cause the liver failure directly, but it did not help. Nothing about the way I lived helped. The stress, the sleeplessness, the years of bad food and overwork, and a stone in my chest where the secret sat. I read everything I could find over the years, every book, every article, every blurry photograph, the Patterson-Gimlin film so many times I could draw every frame from memory. And none of it, not one page, not one documentary, captured what I saw. Because what I saw was not a creature hiding from humanity. What I saw was something facing destruction with a dignity I have never seen in any human being. It was not running, it was not hiding, it was guarding something, standing its post, and nothing was going to make it leave. Emily visited on holidays. She would drive down from Green Bay with whatever boyfriend she had. We would sit in a restaurant and make conversation like two people who shared a last name, but not much else. She never asked what happened to her parents' marriage. I think Karen told her a version that left out the truth. Emily accepted it the way children accept the incomprehensible things adults do. She loved me. I think she still does, but from a distance. The way you love someone you have learned not to rely on. The other men handled it differently, and what happened to them will tell you everything you need to know about what that night did to us. Big Jim died of a heart attack in 1991, 59 years old. They found him in his recliner at home. The television was on. His boots were by the door. He had been alone. His wife had left him 2 years earlier. His sons did not come to the funeral. Big Jim, who had held our chapter together through everything, who had made us swear that oath in the gas station parking lot, died alone in a recliner watching television. I went to the viewing and looked at him in the casket and thought, "You kept the secret, Jim. You kept it all the way to the end." I do not know if that makes you strong or if it makes you a casualty. Bobby Stasiak, Stash, went to Waupun on a 15-year sentence in '88. Aggravated assault. He had always been hot-headed, but after that night, something in him broke loose. He got more volatile, more reckless, like a man who had decided that the rules of the normal world did not apply anymore, because he had seen proof that the normal world was a lie. Carl Dietrich and Freddie Pantoja died together in a head-on collision outside Eau Claire in '91. Same year as Big Jim, drunk driver crossed the center line. They were riding side by side, the way they always rode. Lyle Engstrom had a stroke in 2004 and never recovered fully. Last I heard, he was in a care facility in Oshkosh. Mouse disappeared sometime in the late '90s, just stopped showing up. Nobody knew his real name well enough to track him down. Dennis Brandt, the newest patch, moved to Montana after the club dissolved and became a fishing guide. I talked to him once, maybe 2010. He said he had not slept more than 4 hours a night since '83. He said it quiet, matter of fact, like he was telling me the weather. That leaves Wally Keck and Donnie Riggs and me. Donnie called from Tucson about 10 years ago, 3 in the morning, drunk. He said, "Dale, I still see it." I said, "I know." He said, "What the hell was it?" I said, "I do not know." He said, "Big Jim made us promise." I said, "I know." Then Donnie got quiet for a long time. 2 old men listening to each other breathe across 1,000 miles. He said, "I think Big Jim was wrong. I think we should have told someone. I think keeping it inside is killing us." I said, "Maybe it is." Wally Keck found religion, born again, Southern Baptist. He told me once he saw the creature as a sign from God, a reminder that there are things in creation man is not meant to understand. I do not know if that is true. My grandmother was Catholic, the old Polish kind, rosary beads and holy water and a crucifix in every room. But I lost whatever faith I had somewhere between the Army and the Iron Reapers, and what I saw in Minnesota did not give it back. It took me further from God, because it showed me the world is stranger than any theology accounts for. The things living in the margins of our maps do not care about our prayers. Terry Novak killed himself in '97. His wife found him in the garage, truck running, no note. I do not know if what we saw played a part. Terry had other problems. But I have wondered, in the dark hours, whether the weight of the secret was one burden too many for a man already carrying more than he could bear. I am telling you this now because I am running out of time, and because the promise does not matter anymore. Big Jim is dead. The chapter dissolved in 2003. The men who swore that oath are scattered and dying. The oath dies with them, whether I speak or not. I would rather it die in the light than in the silence. Of the 11 men who stood on that road, I believe 4 of us are still breathing. Donnie in Tucson, Wally in his church somewhere in Tennessee, Dennis in Montana, and me in a 1-bedroom apartment on South 13th Street in Racine, a few blocks from where my grandmother used to make pierogi every Sunday. Sitting in a recliner that is slowly becoming my entire world as my body shrinks around the disease that is finishing me. My hands are trembling. That is the liver failure. The toxins building in my blood. Some days are better. Today is not. But I wanted to tell this story on a hard day because the creature I saw did not wait for easy conditions. It faced the fire on the worst night of its life. I can face this microphone on the worst day of mine. Emily called me last week. She does that more often now. I think Karen told her about the diagnosis. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. Her job, the weather in Green Bay, a movie she saw. And at the end, right before she hung up, she said, "Dad, is there anything you want to tell me? Anything you have been holding on to?" I almost said yes. I almost told her everything. But the words caught in my throat like they always do, tangled in 43 years of silence and habit and fear. I said, "No, sweetheart. I am okay." She said, "K." And then the line went quiet and she was gone. I should have told her. I should have told Karen. I should have told someone, anyone, decades ago. But I was a man who kept secrets for a living. And by the time I realized that this particular secret was eating me alive, I had already lost the people I might have shared it with. So I am telling you instead, whoever you are, wherever you are listening to this, I think about my father, the day they closed the plant. He stood in the kitchen with the letter, my mother crying. He did not cry. He did not rage. He stood there and absorbed it. Polish men of his generation did not crumble. They endured. They put their heads down and worked and carried whatever weight was placed on them until their backs broke or their hearts gave out. That creature was enduring. That is the word I keep coming back to, 43 years later. Enduring. It knew what was coming, and it chose to face it. In that terrible, magnificent refusal to flee, it showed me something about courage I have never found in any church or book or speech. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is standing in the fire because someone has to, because the alternative is letting the fire take everything, and you would rather burn than let that happen. I have thought about that every single day since August 1st, 1983. Every single day. When I was in the shop and the radio was playing and my hands were deep in an engine. When I was lying alone in my apartment staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. When I was sitting across from Emily in a restaurant trying to be a father over plates of food we barely touched. Every day, 43 years of days, 15,700 days of carrying this inside me. And it has never once gotten lighter. I dream about it still, every few nights. I am back on that road, the fire coming, the smoke thick, that figure at the tree line, making that sound. In my dreams, I get off my bike, walk through the smoke, stand beside it, and we face the fire together. In that moment, I am not afraid. I am not alone. I am not the man who let his wife and daughter walk out the door. I am not the man who kept a secret until it hollowed him out. I am just a man standing next to another living thing, facing something terrible, choosing not to run. 11 men saw something in the Chippewa National Forest on August 1st, 1983. What we saw was not an animal and not a man. It was something else, something that does not fit in any category the world has built. It was protecting something. It stood its ground while everything around it burned. Watching it changed us, broke some of us, haunted all of us, and it showed us something about standing your ground that none of us could put into words until now. That creature walked into the fire. I have been running from it ever since. Maybe this is me finally turning around, finally facing the flames, the way it did, the way my father did, the way the men I rode with never could. My name is Dale Kowalski. I am 78 years old. I was a member of the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club, Racine chapter, and on the night of August 1st, 1983, I watched something impossible stand its ground against a wildfire while 11 men on Harleys watched in silence. We never rode that road again. None of us, not once. But I still hear it, that sound, that deep, low chanting. Every night, just before sleep takes me, it is still standing in the fire, and I think it always will be.